Hello, I'm John Ferris. This is my video reflection journal number 2 for my Descriptive Statistics and Data Visualization assignment. For this particular video, I'm going to be analyzing the research for the K-12 data. I will look at the research question and context, examine key vocabulary display items within there. We'll cover briefly SPSS procedural steps, actual output and interpretation of the data, graph interpretation guide, and summary and key takeaways. Our research question for this particular assignment is, what are the characteristics of student reading scores for elementary and middle school students participating in the Texas K-12 Student Success Initiative? Now, as we read that first question, it is important to keep in mind the primary verb that's listed. What are? What does that mean exactly? What does that tell us? Well, it tells us that it's indicative of that it's signaling to us as researchers that we want to describe and characterize our data, not compare groups or examine relationships necessarily, but our descriptive statistics that we derive from this research should tell us what is before we ask why or how. To analyze and interpret the data, we need to first generate it. Okay, and that's what we're going to do here. We will go to the first part, which will be to analyze the reading score. Okay, to do that, we're going to go to Analyze. We're going to go to Descriptive Statistics. We will go to the Explore menu and click Explore. And then we will go to get the reading score, put in our dependent list, click the Plots button, make sure that we have checked the histogram, normality, plots to do that. And then we'll click Continue. Then we'll click OK. Yeah, we should get search results, but I'll stop sharing this point to make sure that we can look at our screen, that I can look at the screen as we're viewing our output. Okay, let's go ahead and share. Okay, we should be looking, the output should be viewable on the share screen now. Now, as we can see, looking at these descriptive statistics for reading score, we have about 3,793 students with valid reading scores of about 4,000 total cases. So that's about 5% missing data, more or less. The mean reading score is, as we can see, 91.43 with a standard deviation of 8.07. This tells us that on average, students scored about 91 points overall, with most scores falling within about 8 points above or below that average. Now, here's something important. The median is measured at 93, which is higher than the mean of 91.43. What does that indicate to us? Well, that indicates that when the median is higher than the mean, that signals to us a negative skewness. And sure enough, our skewness value, as shown below, is at negative 1.018. The negative skew indicates that the tail of the distribution extends to the left. And there are some scores pulling the mean down, but since most students scored well on it, the scores, or the majority of them, were higher. So they range from about 53 to 100, with many students reaching that maximum score of 100. So obviously, the scores are going to be positive, and the results were positive. Okay, now let's go ahead and stop sharing from here and go back to our main score, and we'll look at the SES data interpretation. Now to do that, we need to go back to our main page and quickly conduct our SES interpretation. To do that, we simply go to Analyze, go to Descriptive Statistics again, we'll go to Frequencies. We've already got the SES status in the variable box. We'll click the Charts button. We'll go on to make sure we've got it at bar charts. Click Continue, and we'll click OK. Now let's go ahead and stop sharing just very briefly so we can go back and make sure that you all can see it on your side of the screen. Put there. Let's go and share. Okay, there's our SES status. Now let's do a fair and knowledgeable interpretation of this. For the categorical variable SES status, we had about 3,808 valid cases with about 192 missing. So that's about 4.8% missing data. But looking at the valid percent column, which adjusts for missing data, obviously, we see that the medium SES is the largest group at 41.1%, as shown by our bar chart, followed by low SES at 29.8 and high SES at 29. Okay. What does that indicate to us exactly? What that means is that this bar chart makes it easy to visualize both the medium SES status and the overall SES status. Medium SES clearly has the tallest bar, while low and high are about similar and equal in height. This distribution tells us that our sample has a fairly balanced representation across SES categories with a slight overrepresentation of medium SES students. Why does that skewness matter? Why is that important? Because our skewness is just beyond that -1 or +1 normality. This means that the mean underestimates the typical score and the median better represents the typical student. Now, we may have to look at both inferential and descriptive statistics again. Inferentially wise, we may need to consider non-parametric alternatives, possibly reporting both the mean and median again to get a fuller picture of this, but this reading we believe is accurate and a fair depiction of what is being presented by the data. So in a summary of our findings, we can conclude that the reading score was M91.43, a standard deviation of 8.07, a mean of 93, and a range of 53 to 100. And so the distribution is negatively skewed. Most students did score high, and some lower performing students created the left tail of the data. In the SES status, we have a low of 29.8 as indicated here, medium of 41.1%, and a high of 29.0%. The sample has a balanced representation with medium SES slightly overrepresented. Any of the challenges or key takeaways I have from generating this data probably be the toughest part for me was interpreting the relationship between the mean and the median. tips that I would encourage for my future self would be to use Explore to generate continuous variables such as histogram, box plot, and normality tests. And I report both the mean and the median to correctly interpret the skewness, which is an important part of the data that we have collected to make this determination. I'll stop sharing at this point. This pretty much concludes my interpretation and representation of the data that I have gathered at this point. I thank you for your attention. I hope that this data has offered more analysis directly to you. And if you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.